Hello, this is Mike Borislow, Executive Director at Massachusetts Youth Soccer Association, and I bring to you some recent updates that came out today from the Department of Energy and Environmental Affairs from the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. As you all know by now, youth sports is under the direction of the Department or the Executive Office of Energy and Environmental Affairs, the EEA. And over the last few months, they have been bringing us updates and some support for the work that we're all trying to accomplish with regards to youth sports, and in our case, youth soccer. Today, we received an amendment which becomes effective tomorrow, November 7th. So this amendment truly affects a small number of areas, nothing huge, but some of these changes are pretty dramatic, and so I will cover those. So we do have updates to the mandatory facial coverings for all sports. In addition, out-of-state travel and game modifications. I'll also go over some recent updates, but no major changes from Mass Youth Soccer regarding current soccer activities, gathering limits, and taking attendance. And lastly, I'll touch on indoor play. So facial coverings. The EEA in this latest release amendment came out with a rather clear and distinct message with regards to facial coverings for participants, which are players. During active play, facial coverings, masks, must be worn at all times. The exceptions are during water sports, and another update to an exception is with regards to those who had waivers for medical conditions or disability. Now, individuals must have a documented reason for medical conditions or disability that make them unable to wear a face covering. They must provide documentation if asked. Also, the EEA states that a facial covering is defined as a face mask or cloth facial covering that completely covers the nose and mouth. Now, this is from the EEA. Mass Youth Soccer, as I'll touch on in a second, has a little bit more of a restrictive definition. In addition, the EEA states that during play, when spacing is greater than 6 feet from another player, a mask break to catch their breath may be taken. So no longer may a player run down the field with the mask on their chin or under their nose. That mask must be worn 100% of the time, covering mouth and nose. And the only time the mask can be taken down properly using the right technique is to catch their breath when more than 6 feet away from others. Now, some Mass Youth Soccer requirements on top of the EEA is that we only permit face coverings with loops around a player's ears. Basically, these are face masks that are worn over the nose and mouth, and they loop around the ears. We do not permit gaiters, nor masks that tie behind the head. And there's a few reasons for that. And primarily, the number one reason is dangerous equipment, where it's potentially can cause a choking hazard. And the other is that gaiters are found to be by the CDC non-recommendable. Also, masks with exhalation valves or vents, including mesh masks, yes, there's a mesh mask, are not acceptable and should not be worn. Also, players must properly wear their face covering at all times when on the sidelines, in any huddles, except when 6 feet or more away from another player for a mask break to catch their breath or to drink or eat while on the sideline. If conditions are so severe as to warrant masks too dangerous to wear, the competition must be delayed, postponed, or canceled. These could be conditions caused by rain, snow, possibly heavy smoke from a nearby fire, something along those lines, that if it's too dangerous to wear the mask, it's too dangerous to play, and games and practices must be stopped. Also, it's important to note that coaches and staff and referees and spectator chaperones are required to wear facial coverings and maintain social distancing of 6 feet from all persons at all times. Now, a face mask or a facial covering is a separate article of clothing. It's not permissible to pull a shirt up over your nose and mouth, or to wear a hoodie and tie it as tight so that it's like a snorkel. Those are not face coverings. Those are other articles of clothing. A face covering is a separate article of clothing, separate article that covers the nose and mouth. It's also important to note that some leagues may have even more restrictive policies, such as requiring all coaches to only wear masks that go over the ears, not permitting them to wear a gaiter. The next subject for update is the EEA out-of-state travel policy. I will go through this as slowly as possible because it's important to understand these restrictions. Keep in mind, these restrictions will not affect 90-something% of the play in the state of Massachusetts. However, we do have some leagues and some clubs who do play over state borders, or some clubs who would like to take teams out of state for other competitions. Well, things have changed. Before I jump into this, it's important that I go through some of the definitions. A facility owner, a facility operator. These are individuals that run facilities. They could be owners, employees, volunteers, workers, or the such. But facility operators are the folks that run a facility. Now, a facility could be a private facility, could be a school-owned facility, it could be a municipal-owned facility, or a privately business-owned facility, a private person's facility. Those are facility operators. Activity organizers are the individuals. Typically, they work for a club or for a town program or a league or a soccer business that conducts soccer activities, games, practices, clinics. These are all activities. And so they're known as activity organizers. Now, it's also possible that an activity organizer is also a facility operator or vice versa. So how does this play into out-of-state travel? First off, as released today, facility operators allow only Massachusetts-based teams and Massachusetts-based participants of moderate risk and high risk sports, of which soccer is one, to participate in Massachusetts-based sport events at Massachusetts sport facilities. Basically, folks, facility operators can only have Massachusetts teams, clubs, organizations play in their facility. No out-of-state teams, no out-of-state clubs, no out-of-state folks can come on in and be permitted to play in a facility in Massachusetts. That's the facility operator's responsibility to manage that. Another part of this policy is any Massachusetts-based athlete that chooses to leave the state to participate in a sport event must comply with the Commonwealth's travel rule before returning to work, school, or attending public events. So it's not only the athlete, it would be the parent or chaperone driving them out of state as well. So how does this work? Let's say we have somebody who lives on the northern border of Massachusetts, and they play on a team based in Maine, Vermont, or New Hampshire. Well, they're allowed to go into those states, participate with that team, and come back. because those 3 states, as of today, are non-high-risk states. There's no restrictions on coming back from those states. So you could have a player that lives on the northern border and plays for a club north of the state, and that's perfectly fine. That's permissible. Let's talk about the southern part as it relates to today. Rhode Island and Connecticut are currently considered high-risk states. If you have a resident of Massachusetts that plays on a club or in a program in Rhode Island or down in Connecticut, that's okay, but when they return, they will need to either take a negative test within 72 hours or quarantine for 2 weeks. Another point to keep in mind is some of these states may also restrict Massachusetts residents from coming into their state. So it's important to be familiar with all of the state's travel policies and the such. But for an athlete, an individual athlete, it's okay for them to go out of state. They just have to abide by the Commonwealth of Massachusetts travel rule. Here's where we get into a few things that are a little bit trickier and must be paid attention to for those who travel out of state. Any Massachusetts-based team that chooses to leave the state to participate in a sport event risks suspension of a league's practices and or games. Now, when they say a league's practices or games, they mean the club or the league that this group plays in. So if we have a Massachusetts-based team that decides to travel out of state anywhere, whether it's high risk or low risk, anywhere, they're breaking Massachusetts EEA guidelines, policy, and they risk suspension for all activities. Thus, basically, a Massachusetts team has to play in Massachusetts until these guidelines are updated. And we're not sure when that's going to take place, and it could be a while. Now, if you're a facility owner or an activity organizer, such as a league, that hosts an out-of-state team at a Massachusetts facility or allows an out-of-state player, not just a team, but a player, to participate on a Massachusetts-based team, they risk the facility closure as well as suspension of all league activities. So, facility owner, typically a private owner, or it could be a school or a municipality, and if they allow somebody from out of state to come play in their facility or on their fields, they're at risk of closure. If you're a league and you permit a team from out of state to come play a game in Massachusetts, your league could be shut down, suspended. The other very important part here is the player. It states that allows an out-of-state player to participate on a Massachusetts-based team. So if you have a Massachusetts-based team and you have a player from a neighboring state that comes over to play on that team here in Massachusetts, you're in violation. They're not permitted to cross the border and come play in Massachusetts. Is this restrictive? Sure is, but we all understand, or hopefully we all understand, that we're trying to protect ourselves given the increase that we have in the spread and the numbers, and try and bring this under control. There is some good news, and of course it comes out with this just a few weeks taking place in the regular season, but the game modifications are no longer required. So we can do throw-ins, and we can do corner kicks, and we can head the ball. We can do shoulder-to-shoulder contact if we so choose. The key is the EEA has stated that the mandatory facial coverings permit this type of play, for the modifications to be lifted. It is so important that players wear their masks at all times. I will share with you that the Board of Health from all over the state are very much aware of what's taking place. They're aware that play is going to be changing, and they have the ability to spot check to make sure that masks are being properly worn by everybody. Players may no longer run up and down the field with the mask over the chin or only covering the mouth. It must cover the nose and mouth 100% of the time, unless they remove themselves from play to catch their breath and put the mask back on. It is so important that we comply with this so that we can have the game back the way it was meant to be played. Now, with all that being said, with only a few weeks to go in some regular seasons or 1 week to go, Mass Youth Soccer recommends that the sanctioned leagues under our umbrella continue to utilize the game modifications to complete the current fall league schedules. We think that that would be the right thing to do, seeing as that we've been doing it up to this point, and there's no reason to change back. And this is our way of supporting the state of Massachusetts, efforts to curb the COVID-19 virus and to make sure that we can be back on the fields come springtime, healthy and ready to go. So some of the things that have not changed is current soccer activities, except for the updates, which I just covered. There are really no other changes to our current soccer activities. The spectators must be 6 feet apart. Games must be evenly spaced. Egress and digress from certain facilities must be managed. Sanitization must take place. Bathrooms must be kept clean, so on. Nothing else has really changed except for what I just covered with the face masks, the gatherings, which I'll touch on in a second, which really haven't changed, but the face masks, as well as the out-of-state policies and the such. Let's talk about gathering limits. Now, when you take a look at the latest update for the state, you'll see that a few little things have changed. One thing has not changed is the Mass Youth Soccer gathering limit policy. We are still staying with 1 spectator per player. Now, once again, spectators are parents, legal guardians, or chaperones. They must all follow our return to soccer activity guidelines. And one exception that we do have is that, any spectator who's responsible for other minors and not able to have coverage can bring the minor with them and be with them at their side at the soccer activity. But we are still maintaining the 1 spectator per player policy when it comes to gathering limits. Another piece of information that came out with the EEA is that we do have attendance requirements. We do require all soccer activities to make sure that they keep a roster of all of the players. And some organizations have gone as far, and we commend them for this, as taking attendance of all spectators in addition to coaches, referees, and players and the such. This is great. So what was included in today's guidelines from the EEA is under the section of cooperation with health officials. Facility operators and activity organizers, as well as coaches, participants, and others engaging in sport activities, are required to cooperate with state health officials and local boards of health and their authorized agents. I will say this, in everything that we've been doing with all of our member organizations up to this point in time, and we've had situations of positive tests or somebody who was around somebody, close contact with somebody, positive tests, and where we've been involved with the boards of health, our members have been incredible. Everybody out there has handled this well. Everybody has abided and they've cooperated with health officials. But evidently, the EEA is stressing this because possibly there could be some organizations out there that have not done their part. This is bolded and emphasized by the EEA. Facility operators and activity organizers must keep rosters all participants, the players, with appropriate contact information, and make that information available upon request by state officials, local boards of health, or their authorized agents. So for us, this means any team that takes to a field for practice or for a game as an activity organizer must have this roster with all this contact information. So thus, if you're contacted by a local board of health or a state official, you better have it handy and you better know who was on the field on the specific day, date, and time that they want this information. This is new, and this is the reason why this is so important. Should a facility operator or activity organizer fail to completely and promptly cooperate with health officials, operators, and organizers risk closure or suspension of their practices and games. And lastly, indoor play. As of this release, there are really no major changes regarding indoor play as it relates to the latest release from the EEA. They do have a lot of sections on indoor play for facility operators and activity organizers. There is some additional information Mass Youth Soccer is working on, and we will be creating a separate document relating to indoor soccer activities, which should be out just prior to Thanksgiving. Again, we'd like to thank everybody for your diligence, your respect, your hard work, and your adherence to everything that we have put out with regards to our guidelines. I know we just have a few more weeks to go, so let's not get complacent. Let's take to the fields over this week and next weekend through the holiday, through Thanksgiving, if you are playing through then, just as if these guidelines and everything just started. We have to have a heightened sense of awareness and a keen sense of responsibility. So thank you, everybody. Stay healthy, stay well, and let's make this beautiful game of soccer enjoyable to play. Thank you.